Welcome to the Garen'teed Success Podcast. I'm your host, Garen Phillip, and this is a podcast dedicated to anything success, whether it's business, sex, money, women, or relationships. If you're like me, you're probably a bit obsessed with personal development and growth. So today I'm going to teach you the two most important things that you could possibly do to increase your chances of success in life. I'm also going to introduce you to the king within every man and tell you a story of one of the most badass assassins that ever lived. We're also going to talk a bit about money, power, and women. I know some of you have been requesting that these podcasts get put on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and they are in the process of being verified and put up there. So there'll be a link in the description if you want to listen to them through there. Let's get started. I want you to think for a second about what are two things that dictate the level of success that anyone has in life. Now, you might be thinking maybe IQ score or what college you went to, where you were born, what country you were born to, what your GPA is, what your family's socioeconomic background is. So none of those things actually matter too much when it comes to the level of success you can achieve in life. What psychologist Jordan Peterson has found is the two most important traits that you could possibly increase in your life to live a more successful life is 1, openness to experience, and 2, conscientiousness.
About this, because I'll tell you what it is that you need to do to be successful. Some of these things aren't so malleable, but others are things that you can work on. So then the next best predictor of lifetime success is conscientiousness. And of the two aspects of conscientiousness, say orderliness and industriousness, the better predictor is industriousness.
If you increase or work on these two traits in yourself, you will drastically increase the quality of life that you have and the success that you're having. So openness to experience is, pretty simple. Let's say you became a hermit and locked yourself in your room, in your house for the next 40 years of your life. I believe it's agoraphobia. Those people that are terrified of walking outside of their house. Imagine you did that for 40 years, for the rest of your life. Do you think you're going to live a very successful or happy life? I think not. Now let's flip that and say you go outside every single day excited and adventurous and curious about life and about the world. You are open to all experiences. Now, the extreme of that is, naivety and getting into situations you probably don't want to be in, but the point's there. The more you go out into the world, the more you're open to new things and new people and new opportunities, the more likely you are to be successful. It's just a law of numbers at this point. The more things that you do in life, the more likely you are to find things you enjoy, find people that you enjoy, and find opportunities that make you money. So that's openness to experience. Now the second one is conscientiousness, and the two subsets of conscientiousness is orderliness and industriousness. So industriousness is essentially your ability to set goals and achieve them. And orderliness is how organized you are at doing things, your day-to-day stuff. Now, what I want to focus on in this podcast episode is conscientiousness or orderliness. So in the last episode, I introduced you to the warrior archetype of the subconscious mind. These are deep psychological processes that happen across all animals and humans. But today, we're discussing the king archetype. So I want you to imagine for a second, just envision a king, not a specific king, just the king. I want you to think of the best king you can possibly think of. What traits would he radiate? Well, he'd probably be orderly. He would probably be conscientious. He would probably be benevolent or generous. A lot of times you can think the benevolent father. He's caring and nurturing, yet firm and strict. He's also decisive, provides order, he blesses others, and most importantly, he leaves a legacy. So in the last episode, we talked a little bit about the king and his realm, and I want to kind of compound on that in this episode. So I want you to think of the President of the United States. Think of him as being an embodiment of the king archetype. He's not the king, he's just fulfilling the role of the king in our society. One of the key factors of the king, especially in our society today, is he doesn't necessarily have to own anything. You don't have to own a lot to embody the king archetype. In fact, the president doesn't really own anything, but his realm and his influence is essentially the entire world. And when it comes to women, what are women usually most attracted to? Well, it's usually a man's influence. It's his realm, how much money he has, what his wealth is, how much influence he has and control and order he has over his world. And ultimately, what kind of legacy is he going to be leaving behind? Now, inside of every man, there is a king. The problem with our society today, though, is there isn't really a healthy way, or men aren't taught a way to bring forth this energy and incorporate it into their life. I want to introduce you to a word by Carl Jung, and this is a very important word if you are somebody who's very into self-development and growth, and that is the process of individuation. This is a word I believe Carl Jung came up with, but individuation is the process of any individual developing their psyche and bringing forth everything that is unconscious into their conscious mind and basically integrating it into their existence. Now that might sound kind of woo-woo, but essentially what I want to achieve with these next 3 episodes is essentially teach you guys these deep psychological processes that happen in the mind, and that allows you to bring them forth. This podcast and you learning these things is the process of individuation. You are building a more complete and whole map of who you are in your psyche, which allows you to become a more fulfilled and full person. So with that said, let's talk a little bit about the king and orderliness and the most valuable thing that you own. And if you've been watching any of my content for any amount of time, it's your time. Your time is the most valuable thing you own. And in fact, the younger you are, the more valuable it is. And that's due to compounding interest. Your time is directly correlated to money. The reason companies like Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and any social media company, the reason these companies are the biggest companies in the world and some of the richest companies in the world is because they understand very well that your time is money. The more time you spend on these platforms, the more money they make. Your time is your power, and it is your influence. You get to choose what you spend it on and how you spend it. The majority of people don't value their time, and they don't understand the true value of their time, and they give it away freely. Biggest things that will take away your time is social media, video games, porn, women, everyone you spend time with, your friends, your family, and work. Those things right there are the biggest time sinks you will have in your life. And if you pull out your phone and go to your settings real quick and just go to your settings and search screen time and find out how much time you actually spend a day on your phone. Most people spend 4 to 6 hours a day on their phone. Kind of hard to believe, but if you were to take a calculator and take 6 hours a day, times that by 7 days a week, and times that by 52 weeks in a year, that's 2,184 hours that you give just to your phone. Now, if you work a 40-hour work week, you're also giving 2,080 hours to your work. So just there alone, you've got 2,000 to 4,000 hours there that you could spend on other things. So one of the things that you can do to better embody the king is basically become more organized with your life, become more disciplined with what you're doing and what you're spending your time on. This gets into cognitive behavioral therapy a little bit, or pattern recognition, but essentially if you find yourself constantly wasting time on something, there's a very simple process that you can go through to change this. Go on your phone, check what apps you spend the most time on, and then ask yourself this question. Does this application make me money? Does this application build my influence? Does this application expand my realm? Am I using this to network and meet people, which is growing your realm? Or am I just wasting my time and giving it away freely? If the answer is you're wasting your time, delete the app. You don't have to delete it forever. And you might be having some resistance right now, thinking like, oh, I don't really want to delete it. I'm telling you right now, delete the app. You don't have to delete it forever, but what's happened is you've developed a pattern of behavior with this thing that isn't healthy. It's not conducive to your overall long-term growth and success and becoming a more whole person. So why do you need it? Why do you use it? I don't want to get too much into rewriting behaviors and patterns and stuff in your life in this episode, but just know that you don't have to delete it forever. Just delete it for a month and then try to bring it back into your life, but be aware of the power and the amount of time that you're using on it and try to develop other habits that are healthier with it. One of the things that you can do and that I do with my phone is I actually remove all notifications from all applications. The only time my phone goes off is I get a vibration about a text message. I don't even have, when people text me, I don't even have the things popping up on the main screen before I unlock it. All I get is a vibration, and if I don't feel the vibration or have my phone, I don't know I get text. Because phones are designed to trigger you to jump on them and then start wasting time. If you cut the trigger off, you will be amazed at how much time you save. Now, just to give you an idea of how valuable your time really is, I want you to pull out your phone, open up your calculator, and I want you to input the amount of money you have in the bank or in your stock portfolios, whatever your net worth is. I want you to put that in the calculator. And if you're young or you don't have a lot of net worth, if you're living the paycheck to paycheck, which is what I did for the first 10 years of my adult life, look around your house or think about everything you own. Think about your car, how much money you have in your car, or if you got an Xbox, it's $500, TV, that's so much money. You got a bicycle. Your bed was probably somewhat expensive. Don't do it down to the dollar, but just think about all the stuff you own and how much money that is. Put it in the calculator, and then I want you to times that number by 1.9. That is how much money your money would be worth if you put it into the stock market and it made an average of 7% returns per year for 10 years. And just for reference, the stock market usually averages 7.8 over a 20 or 50 year period. Now, take that original number that you have, all the money that you have, and I want you to times that by 3.8. That's how much money you have at 20 years. You can do if you're watching on YouTube, I'll put up a list of numbers you can see per year. If you're watching this and you're 18, 20 years old, your life expectancy is well over 100 years old. So go ahead and take that number that you have and then times it by 14.9. That's how much money your money would be worth in 40 years. You can times it by 57.9, and that's 60 years. And then for those of you who are 20, you can actually times that by 224.2. That's how much money you would be worth at 80 years of life. The reason your time is the most valuable thing you own is because you're only going to be as young as you ever are right now. And every second, every hour, every week, month, year that passes by, you're getting closer to the day you die. And that means you're going to make less and less money when it comes to compounding interest. So if you're watching this and you're 40 years old, your life expectancy is somewhere around 80 years old. So you only have 40 years left versus the 20-year-old guy who will probably live over 100 years old. So he's got another 80 years. He's got double the life expectancy of a 40-year-old guy today. So this is a very important lesson that I try to teach guys all the time, is just really understand and value your time. And don't waste it on social media, video games, porn, women, friends that aren't doing anything beneficial for you or helping you grow with your life. And try to get out of your 9-to-5 as fast as possible so that you can make passive money and do the things that you want and invest that energy and time into yourself. All right, so enough about numbers and all that stuff. Let's talk about the story of the most badass assassin that I've ever read. So the year is 509 BC. We're in the Roman Empire. And today we're telling the story of Gaius Mucius, a man who saved Rome. There was an invasion by an Etruscan king, and according to the legend, Mucius volunteered to assassinate the king. But before he could kill the king, he was captured, and then he was brought forth in front of the Etruscan king. As Gaius stood before the king, he was sentenced to death and to be burnt alive. Before the guards could haul him off to his sentencing, Gaius said, "I am Gaius Mucius, a citizen of Rome. I am here as an enemy to kill my enemy, and I am as ready to die as I am to kill. We Romans act bravely, and when adversity strikes, we suffer bravely. Watch, so that you know how cheap the body is to men who have glory in their eyes." Then Gaius Mucius shoved his right hand into a smoldering fire next to him and burnt his hand to a crisp, unwavering, unflinching, staring the king in his eyes the entire time. As he stared the king in his eyes, he told the king that there are 300 other men just as brave and willing to sacrifice their life to take his and end this war. The Etruscan king, shocked and in awe, pardoned Gaius for his deeds and his bravery and withdrew his forces, ending the war. Now, I think that story is probably one of the most badass stories I've ever heard as far as somebody embodying the warrior archetype. And I think it's also a perfect example of how powerful a warrior energy can be, that it can topple even the king's energy. Now, in the last episode, we talked a lot about the warrior and a bit about the polar shadows of each. And we said that, a warrior isn't much good without a king, and a king isn't much good without a warrior. So Gaius Mucius was the embodiment of the warrior archetype, and he was fulfilling the duties given to him by his king or the Roman emperor. And wielded correctly, the warrior energy can topple a king energy. But this can equally go internally for yourself. So let's talk about the polar shadows of the king archetype. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to pull up a photo real quick. If you're not, then I want you to imagine a triangle. And at the top of this is the king in his fullest. To the left, the over-exaggerated ego of the king archetype is the tyrant. And the lacking shadow or ego of the king is the weakling. And if you're a fan of Game of Thrones, then you know this archetype very well. Joffrey was the tyrant king, while Tommen, the brother, who later took heir, was the weakling king. It wouldn't be till Jon Snow became king where you see the king in his fullest. So the fundamental purpose of a king is, if he's tyrannical, he's oppressive. If he's trying to control people, he's trying to bend the will of others rather than being nurturing and understanding and supportive of those people and himself as well. And the weakling king is basically filled with fear and insecurity and doubt and refuses to make decisions or take action or give orders to the warrior to enact what he needs to do in life. So when it comes to you as an individual, you have a king inside of you, and he might be tyrannical. Maybe you're in a relationship and you're very overbearing and possessive, or maybe you're the opposite. Maybe you're the weakling king. Maybe you are riddled with fear and anxiety and you can't take action and you can't get things done. The way you center yourself and bring yourself to the king energy is you accept that you are it's similar to the warrior energy, where you accept something that's higher than yourself. You have to figure out the direction you're going in life and figure out what it is you want. And then you need to remove, like we talked about with social media and porn and video games, you need to remove things out of your life that don't serve that purpose. Anything that distracts you, anything that takes away your time, anything that is not directly correlated to helping you grow into the individual you want to become, it needs to be removed. And this is the process of the king. It is order and structure and organization. Now, the relationship between the king and the warrior is very important. So once you get that order and that structure and that direction in your life, you then need the warrior to enact it. You need the warrior archetype to go out and face the fears that you need to become the man that you want. Now, there's one last thing I want to talk about with Gaius Mucius in this story, and I think it's a fantastic example, and that is that the warrior and the king understand that the body and the mind is not who you are. The other way you could say this is the body and the mind is not the spirit. It is not the soul, if you're religious. The king and the warrior, they are not you as well. You don't become the king. We'll talk a little bit about, I got a warning for these archetypes at the end of this podcast, but the warrior and the king are not you, and you will never be the warrior and the king. They are archetypes that are separate from you. Your self, your psyche, your mind is just a conduit to which you can live out and fulfill the roles of these archetypes. Gaius Mucius understood very well that the body is not who he is, and it doesn't have any influence or impact on his decisions and what he needs to do to fulfill his duty or to live in a way that's true to his spirit and his soul. So if you're a fan of Stoicism, you're very familiar with this concept where you look at the body and the mind more as an obstacle that you need to overcome to become your full actualized self, or go through the process of individuation. The body is designed to stay comfortable, and the mind will work synergistically with the body to maintain homeostasis and make sure that you never go do anything that's outside of the realm of discomfort. We haven't talked too much about the difference between masculine psychology, or masculine mature psychology, and immature masculine psychology, or boy psychology versus man psychology. But Boy psychology is essentially being afraid of going out into the world and doing the things that you need to do. And it's there for a reason. It's there to protect you and keep you safe. So I want to run you through a quick scenario, and this kind of explains, this is cognitive behavioral therapy, where I want you to think about something that you need to do. Like, you know you need to do it, but you haven't been doing it. Now, I want you to pay attention to the feelings that come forth when you think about that. If you're a guy, you're probably pretty disconnected with your feelings, and you might not even be able to identify what that feeling is, but there's a feeling there because it's keeping you from doing it. Now, when you think about doing something, your mind probably automatically creates a reason why you can't do it, or you get upset or pissed off or shame yourself because you know you need to do it, but you're not doing it. So what I want you to focus on is, where do those thoughts come from? Have you ever thought about where your thoughts come from, is what I'm getting at. And in cognitive behavioral therapy, you'll find that your thoughts are just a manifestation that comes forth from what you're feeling. If you're depressed, you're going to have depressive thoughts. If you're joyful, you're going to have joyful thoughts. If you're having sex and oxytocin's pumping through your blood, you're going to have those thoughts. So what you feel and what you think is a very interconnected scenario. What Gaius Mucius understood is that he had a duty in his life. His spirit or his soul or whatever you want to call it, it had something that it needed to do, and it didn't matter what the body or what the mind said. He just went and did it. And that is the pinnacle of embodying an archetype. It's living your life in a way that is true to what you know you need to do, irregardless of what the pain is, of what the consequences are, of what people are going to think, or what is going to happen to you. The full form of a warrior is essentially accepting death. And while death can be your life, it can also be a metaphorical sense. You know, in the last episode, we talked about how the warrior was destruction, but destruction in itself isn't necessarily bad. It just depends on how you use it. So if you can combine the warrior archetype and the warrior mindset and just getting things done that you need to do, irregardless of what your mind says and what your body is feeling, you can get a lot done. But you need the king and his direction and his orderliness and his blessing. A lot of times people feel ashamed of what they want to do for whatever reason, but fundamentally, you have to accept that you give yourself blessing to do the things that you need to do, even though other people might not like them or approve of them. Because at the end of the day, you're the one who's living your life. You're the one who's suffering the consequences. You're the one who's feeling what you're feeling. No one else is. And no one else is responsible for those feelings other than yourself. So while life is difficult and while the things you need to do can be upsetting, you have to do them. Because the alternative is that you don't. And just take a second to think about what your life would be like in 5 years if you stay exactly where you're at. That's an absolutely terrifying idea for me. I do not want to be exactly where I'm at right now in 5 years. The warrior typically works best singularly or as a team. This is also another reason I try to recommend guys find healthy masculine groups to work inside, because we're very tribal by nature. We're very gang-like. If you've read The Way of Men by Jack Donovan, it's a very similar book to this concept. But there are circles of men that are their boy masculinity, and then there's man masculinity. There's actually some benefits to having the boy psychology. And just to reference again, I'll bring up the photo of the king triangle in his fullest. The immature version of the king is the divine child. He's essentially the curious kid, the adventurous kid, the kid that is kind of has a vigor for life. The polar opposite shadow of that is the high chair tyrant. That's the kid that expects everything but gives nothing back in return. And then the weakling prince is the kid who's just totally shut down and doesn't do anything. The divine child is actually a useful archetype, even though it's an immature version of masculinity. For example, if you've ever met somebody or a guy who's very adventurous and curious, but he's not orderly, he doesn't have direction, he just has that boy curiosity. That's a very powerful energy to have, but you need to tame it with the king archetype and work with it that way. But what I'm getting at is you want to find and surround yourself with individuals who are dedicating themselves to a higher purpose or a higher cause. They're embodying the warrior archetype. They're getting things done and they're achieving their goals, and they have direction and they have order and they have a structure of what they're doing. Being able to be around someone that's like that, or a team of people that are like that, it allows you to embody these archetypes much more efficiently and much more effectively versus just watching YouTube videos or reading about it in books. This stuff, again, works best with visualization or just real life experience, being around people that are like that. Now, in the last episode, I played a scene from Rocky. I'm going to play it again, but I want you to watch. It's only about 10 seconds, but I want you to watch all of the archetypes that are hit in like 2 sentences. He hits the king in his fullness. He hits the warrior archetype. He even calls out the weakling prince and basically strives for the best individual you can possibly be, all in like 10 seconds. So check this clip out.
Now, if you know what you're worth, now go out and get what you're worth. But you gotta be willing to take the hits and not pointing fingers saying you ain't where you want to be because of him or her or anybody. Cowards do that, and that ain't you. You're better than that.
All right, so I'm going to replay that and break it down sentence by sentence, because I think this is just it's one of the best scenes that, like, if you think about it, the entire Rocky movies are just the embodiment of the warrior and the king in a little bit. Sylvester Stallone probably isn't very well versed in psychology, so it's fascinating that this stuff pops up in our culture without you even really thinking about it. And it's the reason that the Rocky movies are such a great movie is because they really hit home on these deep psychological processes.
Now, if you know what you're worth, now go out and get what you're worth.
All right, so that right there is the king. You have to know, you have to give yourself blessing to become who you want to be. And then you also have to have direction. You have to know where you're going. That's all king energy, king archetype.
But you got to be willing to take the hits.
That's warrior. You have to accept the pain and the suffering that comes with trying to achieve what you want to achieve in life.
And not pointing fingers saying you ain't where you want to be because of him or her or anybody. Cowards do that, and that ain't you. You're better than that.
Now that is calling out. That's essentially a call to masculinity. That's a call to becoming the ideal version of yourself. Don't be the coward or the weakling prince. Don't be the coward warrior. Do what you need to do and do it as best as you can and just get it done. That's a fantastic scene there. If you want to watch it, just search Rocky speech. If you have any other examples of pop culture and movies and embodying these archetypes, put them in the comments below. I'd love to see them and watch your interpretations of them. So I'm going to wrap this up. If you want to tap into the king archetype, the best thing you can do is start to organize and structure your life. This is kind of cliche and a meme at this point with Jordan Peterson, but clean up your damn room. Like, everything that is your realm, everything that is your influence, everything that you own, it needs to have order. It needs to have structure, because order is one of those skills or traits that will transfer to every other part of your life. If you order one thing, you will become more orderly, and the rest of your life will become orderly. If you aren't budgeting your money and budgeting your time, if you're not aware of these things and you're not handling your life as a business, then don't expect to have the life that you want. You have to develop these skills. You have to develop these traits to become a better version of yourself. So the first thing is clean up your immediate area, clean up your life, organize your money, organize your time, delegate. One of the things that the king does is he delegates to other people. Like, the king has, we'll talk, the next episode is going to be the magician, which is essentially the classic tale of this is King Arthur and the Round Table, and then Merlin was the magician. But the king has people do different things, and you have to be able to delegate yourself to do certain things and be orderly with your time. The other thing that you can do is figure out the direction in your life. So there's a real quick process that I do that kind of helps people. This is actually a very in-depth process, but I can give it to you shorthand. If you don't really know what you want to do in life, the best thing to do is remove everything from your life that you don't find fulfillment in. Again, porn, sex, women, video games, social media. All that stuff entertains you, but it doesn't give you fulfillment. Remove those things from your life, and then just sit and be like, being stoic and alone can be a very valuable thing to figuring out what you want to do. When you can sit alone, you'll quickly kind of gravitate towards things that you're curious about. So once you remove things, then start bringing new things into your life that you have always wanted to do, but you've just never really taken the time because you've been wasting your time with all these other things that are distracting you. So that's one way to kind of figure out what you're wanting to do with your life, is just go out and do things that are new and curious, because that's openness to experience, and that's going to drastically increase your chances of success in life. The other thing you can do is sit down and think about somebody that you admire, and then think about the trait that you admire in them, and realize that you admire those traits because you wish to become those traits. That's the reason people admire, is they see something that they don't have that they want to become. And then build out a game plan, bring the king energy forth, bring out organization, and figure out how can I achieve, or how can I become better at that trait, and then start going out and doing things that embody those traits. That can be a very fulfilling way to develop yourself and become a more interesting person. So I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. In the next one, I actually am about to go shoot another podcast with a friend. He actually embodies the warrior archetype very well, so I'll do an interview with him. So the next episode might be that interview, and then we're going to jump into the magician archetype, and essentially the master manipulator, the man who can wield knowledge and manipulate his world and his realm into what he sees fit. My name is Garen Phillips. This is the Garen'teed Success Podcast. See you guys next time.
Moral excellence comes about as a result of habit. We become just by doing just acts, temperate by doing temperate acts, brave by doing brave acts. The roots of education are bitter, but the fruit is sweet. Beware the barrenness of a busy life.